Have you ever trusted someone, only to realize later they were slowly breaking you down, piece by piece? Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. Some people don't just carry pain, they pass it on. Today we're diving into 5 warning signs you're dealing with someone truly toxic, through the lens of Stoic wisdom, so you can protect your peace before it's too late. We all stumble. We all make mistakes. No one walks through life without scars or regrets, but there's a huge difference between someone who's imperfect and trying, and someone who's intentionally destructive. Some people carry wounds, others carry weapons, and if you've ever been close to a person who drains you emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, you know the kind of damage they can cause. It's a heartbreaking truth. But some individuals walk through this world not with kindness or empathy, but with bitterness, manipulation, and deep malice. They hurt others, over and over again, sometimes because they've been hurt, sometimes because of unresolved trauma, and sometimes simply because that's who they've become. But whatever the cause, the outcome is the same. These people will pull you into their storm if you're not careful, and that's why awareness is power. Stoic philosophy gives us a unique and powerful lens to examine this. Not to judge others from a high place of morality, but to protect our well-being and preserve what the Stoics called inner tranquility. This isn't about building walls or becoming cold and distant. It's about learning to see clearly, about walking through life with eyes wide open. Because once you can recognize malicious traits, you no longer carry the confusion or self-blame that toxic people often leave behind. So in this video, we'll walk together through 5 powerful signs, viewed through Stoic wisdom, that you're dealing with someone whose presence may be slowly poisoning your peace. And we begin with one of the most common but dangerous behaviors. Sign number 1, the urge to control control. It's something all humans wrestle with. We want to feel in charge of our environment, our relationships, our future. That desire isn't inherently wrong. But when it morphs into domination, when one person begins trying to own the life of another, that's when it becomes toxic. Stoicism teaches us a profound truth. Real control isn't about manipulating others. It's about mastering ourselves. The Stoics, especially thinkers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, repeatedly reminded us the only thing we truly control is ourselves, our thoughts, our actions, our reactions, everything else outside our hands. But a malicious person doesn't live by this wisdom. Instead, they try to shape others into who they want them to be. They confuse love with possession, care with control, protection with restriction. It often starts small. They'll say things like, "I just want what's best for you. I'm only trying to help. Trust me, you shouldn't do that." But over time, these words begin to feel less like support and more like a cage. They may demand to know where you are at all times. They may subtly criticize your friends or isolate you from others. They may control how you dress, what you do, or even how you speak. And they'll do it all under the mask of love. But Stoic philosophy calls that out for what it is, fear in disguise. Someone who tries to control you isn't operating from love, they're operating from insecurity, because deep down they don't trust the world or themselves, so they try to shrink yours. The invisible wall control in relationships builds something dangerous, an invisible wall. You may not see it at first, but you feel it. You feel the tension in your chest, the pressure to comply, the hesitation before you speak, the way you second-guess every decision. You begin walking on eggshells. You begin silencing your needs. You begin disappearing, little by little. And that's the goal of a controlling person, not just to influence you, but to erase you, to shape you into a version they feel comfortable with, even if it means killing your light. What Stoicism teaches us about freedom. The Stoics believed freedom wasn't about breaking rules or avoiding commitments. It was about self-rule, about being governed not by impulse or fear, but by wisdom and purpose. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." So what happens when you realize someone is trying to dominate or control you? You step back. You reclaim your space. You choose freedom, not in rebellion, but in wisdom. Because control never leads to connection. It leads to corrosion. And if someone's love only works when you shrink yourself to fit it, then it was never love to begin with. The urge to control is one of the clearest signs that someone is not coming from a place of love, but from fear, insecurity, and selfishness. But it's only the first warning sign. There are others, more subtle, more manipulative, and even more damaging if you don't know what to look for. In the next part, we'll uncover the second behavior that Stoicism helps us see clearly, another red flag that can save you years of heartbreak if you recognize it in time. So keep watching. Because the more we understand, the freer we become. We ended the last part with a truth that many learn the hard way. When love turns into control, it stops being love at all. Now let's take that truth a step further, because control doesn't just damage relationships on the outside. It quietly eats away at the inside too, eroding self-worth, confidence, and even our ability to grow. Stoic philosophy reminds us that when we try to control others, we don't just hurt them, we weaken ourselves. It teaches us to release that tight grip and shift our focus inward, to control our emotions, our choices, our reactions, because that's where true freedom begins. The Stoic counter to control, self-awareness and acceptance. So what do we do when we find ourselves falling into patterns of control, or worse, when we're on the receiving end? The Stoics have a simple yet profound answer. Understand, accept, let go. Understand that every person, every soul, has the right to their own life, their own path, their own choices. Accept that no matter how much we care, we cannot live for someone else. Let go of the need to direct every outcome, and instead, master the only thing we truly can, ourselves. This shift in mindset doesn't just lead to less conflict, it leads to a life of peace, growth, and meaning. Let's explore this deeper with a real-world story, one that plays out in countless relationships across the world. Jack and Julia, when love becomes a cage. Jack and Julia started out like many couples do, with warmth, trust, and genuine affection. They supported each other's dreams, laughed easily, and found comfort in one another's presence. But over time, something inside Jack began to shift. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sudden, it was quiet, subtle. A creeping fear that he couldn't quite name, a fear of losing Julia. Driven by that fear, Jack began to act out, not with violence, but with control disguised as concern. He questioned Julia's friends, subtly labeling some of them as bad influences. He wasn't shouting, he was suggesting. He didn't forbid, he just worried. He expressed disapproval over how she dressed, where she went, and who she spent time with. And every time she pushed back, he'd respond, "I just want people to respect you. I'm only looking out for you. It's because I love you." But love rooted in fear isn't love at all. Julia, in the beginning, tried to be patient. She believed that if she just reassured Jack enough, if she changed a little here and there, things would get better. She made compromises. She pulled back from friends. She adjusted her schedule. She softened her voice. But instead of building peace, Jack's fear only grew. And with it, so did his control. Each day, Julia felt her personal space shrinking. Her voice, once strong and confident, began to tremble with hesitation. She found herself in arguments she never wanted, defending choices she used to make freely. Jack, meanwhile, grew more desperate, his need to protect becoming an obsession to possess. What began as love had now become a battlefield of insecurity, guilt, and emotional exhaustion, and neither of them were winning. The painful breaking point. Eventually, Julia faced a truth she could no longer ignore. She no longer felt like herself. She was no longer the joyful, free-spirited woman Jack had first fallen in love with. She had become a version of herself shaped by fear, not freedom. The cost of Jack's control wasn't just her relationships or routines. It was her identity. And Jack? He too was suffering, trapped in a loop of fear and desperation, trying to hold on so tightly that he was slowly crushing what he loved most. This is the heartbreak of control. It doesn't just steal freedom from one person, it creates suffering on both sides. In time, Julia knew what she had to do. With a heavy heart but a clearer mind, she chose to walk away. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of a deep need to reclaim her freedom, her self-worth, and her inner peace. What had started as a relationship filled with hope and connection had become a painful lesson in the power of trust and the cost of its betrayal. A Stoic reflection, Seneca's reminder. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest voices, once said, "Can you no longer see a road to freedom? It's right in front of you. You need only turn over your wrists." A powerful image, isn't it? The idea that liberation isn't something we find out there. It's a turning inward. a decision to release the chains we've unknowingly put on ourselves. The question we're left with is this: are you still trying to control the uncontrollable, or are you learning to honor both your freedom and the freedom of others? Stoicism isn't just a collection of quotes or ancient advice. It's a way of life, a call to take ownership of our emotions, to rise above our fears, and to live with quiet strength. It's a reminder that we don't have to live in reaction to the world. We can live with intention. And in doing so, we not only avoid harming others, we become whole ourselves. Smooth transition to next part. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into another trait of harmful people, one that's far more deceptive than control. A mask that hides darker intentions behind a dazzling smile. Get ready, because the second sign is more dangerous than it seems. Sometimes charm can light up a room like a warm fire on a cold night. But if you look closely, not every fire warms. Some burn. Previously, we uncovered how control can quietly destroy a relationship. Now we turn to a more subtle but equally dangerous trait: deceptive charm. Sign number 2, the mask of charm. On the surface, charm feels disarming, it feels inviting. We all crave connection, approval, admiration, and so it's easy to be drawn to those who seem confident, kind, and warm. But Stoic philosophy urges us to look beyond the surface, not just at others, but at ourselves. What are we responding to? What instincts are being triggered? Because sometimes, behind a beautiful smile, there's a motive that has nothing to do with love and everything to do with self-interest. The difference between real and fake allure. Here's what the Stoics want us to remember. Not all charm is dangerous. Some people are truly kind. They give without expecting anything in return. They offer their presence and their help with no agenda attached. But others, they charm to disarm. They use politeness as a weapon. They wrap their self-serving desires in the language of generosity. The key difference? Intent and consequence. A truly kind person doesn't expect repayment. They help because it's who they are. But someone using charm for manipulation, their help always comes with strings. They may not say it. They may never ask for anything directly. But one day you'll hear a sentence like, "After all I've done for you," or "I just thought you'd have my back like I had yours." And suddenly, their kindness doesn't feel kind anymore. Case study: Mark, the office charmer. Let me tell you a story. Mark was everything you'd want in a colleague. On the surface, he was sharp, successful, and socially skilled, well-dressed, well-spoken, and always ready to lend a hand. Need help finishing a report? Mark was there. Need a volunteer for a project? He'd raise his hand first. But over time, people began to notice a pattern. His help was never free. He'd remind co-workers, gently at first, of the things he'd done. He'd mention favours in passing, framing them like friendly jokes. But the message was always clear: you owe me. He helped one teammate finish a major proposal, then later pushed them to support his promotion. He volunteered to lead a team initiative, only to leverage its success as his personal ladder up the corporate hierarchy. His generosity? Calculated. His kindness? A transaction. People began to feel uncomfortable, used, manipulated, like they were pawns in Mark's personal chess game. That's when the mask started to slip. When charm is a means to an end. This is exactly what Stoicism warns us about. Not everyone who helps you has good intentions, and sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't loud or aggressive. It's the one who smiles the most, says all the right things, and always seems just a little too perfect. These individuals don't exploit through force. They exploit through charm, and once they've woven a web of favours, guilt, and subtle pressure, you'll feel trapped without ever realising how it started. The Stoic way: awareness and autonomy. So how do we protect ourselves? Stoicism doesn't ask us to become cynical. It doesn't say trust no one. It says be aware, be observant. Ask yourself, is this person truly generous, or are they building a debt I didn't agree to? Pay attention to the feeling you have around them. Do you feel safe, empowered, or do you feel subtly pressured, indebted, or drained? Trust your instincts, but verify with wisdom. Be slow to hand over your loyalty, because once you start bending to someone's unspoken expectations, you stop walking your own path. Charm is inevitable, but so is discernment. Here's the truth. Charm is part of human interaction. We're social creatures. We want to be liked. We want to connect. But Stoicism teaches us to anchor ourselves in awareness and autonomy. to stand firm in our values, so we're not easily swayed by appearances. It's not about hardening your heart, it's about sharpening your mind. When you know who you are, you're less likely to fall for who they pretend to be. Reflection. Have you seen behind the mask? Let me ask you, have you ever met someone who used charm to get ahead? Someone whose kindness seemed sincere until it became a transaction? How did you deal with it? And how can we as individuals learn to spot the difference between genuine connection and strategic manipulation, especially in today's hypersocial professional world? We'd love to hear your experience. Share your thoughts in the comments below, because when we share, we grow. And when we grow together, we build a community not just of strength, but of clarity and character. Smooth transition to next section. Now, not everyone hides behind a smile. Some wear no mask at all, because what's missing isn't kindness or charm. It's something deeper, something darker, a complete absence of what makes us human. In the next section, we'll explore the third sign you may be dealing with a truly malicious person. Stay with us, because the truth only protects you when you learn to see it. Not all harm is loud. Sometimes the deepest wounds are caused not by what someone does, but by what they refuse to feel. After exposing the charm that conceals hidden agendas, we now turn to something more chilling: the absence of compassion. The absence of empathy. Imagine this. An employee approaches their CEO to request time off. Their loved one is gravely ill. The emotional toll is heavy. They need space, not for luxury, but for survival. But instead of support, they're met with coldness, a stiff look, a dismissive tone, and the words, "Work comes first." No flexibility. No human consideration, just the bottom line. This isn't just a bad decision, it's a reflection of something much deeper, a complete absence of empathy. What's the result? The employee feels dehumanized, not like a person, but like a tool, disposable, replaceable, invisible. And when people feel that way, trust dissolves, respect erodes. The very foundation of collaboration begins to crack, because empathy isn't a luxury, it's the glue that holds people together. What the Stoics teach us about balance. Now, to be clear, Stoicism values logic. It teaches us not to be ruled by emotion. But that doesn't mean we abandon compassion. In fact, Stoic wisdom urges us to find the balance between logic and love. When someone's in pain, cold detachment isn't strength, it's weakness dressed as control. Empathy doesn't mean we lose ourselves in someone else's emotions. It means we acknowledge their reality, offer support where we can, and treat them as fellow human beings, not just parts in a machine. The cost of cold leadership. When a leader fails to show empathy, it affects more than just one employee. It sends a message to the entire workplace: your struggles don't matter here. That message creates distance. It breeds silence, resentment, and fear. People stop asking for help, they stop trusting, they stop caring. And what follows? Productivity drops, creativity dries up, talent walks away, all because compassion was absent when it mattered most. Recognizing the impact of a heartless environment. A workplace without empathy isn't just unpleasant, it's toxic. Sure, it might function, deadlines might still be met, projects might still be completed, but beneath the surface, there's tension, there's pain, there's a quiet erosion of morale that eventually becomes impossible to ignore, because when people feel unseen, unheard, and unsupported, they stop showing up with their full selves. The Stoic approach: responding, reacting. So how do we handle these moments? How do we stand firm when faced with someone who lacks compassion? The answer, once again, lies in Stoicism. The Stoics remind us, we cannot control what others do, only how we respond. When someone treats us with indifference or cruelty, we have a choice. We can mirror their coldness, or we can rise above it. We can choose grace. We can choose strength. We can choose not to become like them. That doesn't mean we stay silent or tolerate injustice. It means we respond with clarity, without letting bitterness take root. Compassion starts with ourselves. And here's something just as important. Practice empathy, not only toward others, but toward yourself. Sometimes the hardest person to show compassion to is the one staring back in the mirror. Remind yourself, you're doing your best. You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to rest. And above all, you're allowed to set boundaries with people who lack empathy, even if they're in positions of power. Because you matter, and your well-being is not a negotiable asset. Seneca's wisdom, enduring with grace. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic minds, once said, "It is not what you endure that matters, but how you endure it." That quote echoes with power, especially in moments when we feel unseen or uncared for. Life will bring us face to face with people who lack empathy. That's inevitable. But how we carry ourselves in those moments, with dignity, courage, and compassion, determines the kind of person we become. And in choosing to act from wisdom rather than pain, we become more than just survivors. We become examples. We become lights for others still walking through the shadows. Smooth transition to the next section. In a world that often seems too fast, too cold, too indifferent, empathy becomes not just a virtue, but a form of quiet rebellion. And as we continue this journey, we'll explore a fourth sign that often hides behind silence, a trait that damages not with harsh words, but with deliberate deception. Stay with us, because in learning to spot these signs, we protect our peace and grow stronger in the process. Compassion isn't just something we show to others, it's something we must practice toward ourselves, especially when the world around us feels harsh, cold, and unkind. In the last section, we explored the pain caused by those who lack empathy. Now we turn to something just as destructive, but even more calculated: the web of lies. Sign number 4, the web of lies. Have you ever felt your heart tighten, your gut whisper that something wasn't right, even before the facts confirmed it? That's the power of instinct. And often it's your soul detecting dishonesty long before your mind catches up. Some people lie without blinking. It's not a slip of the tongue. It's a pattern. It's a strategy. These individuals don't use lies just to avoid trouble. They use them as tools, as weapons, to gain power, to escape accountability, to control narratives. Their lies aren't just about convenience. They are precise, rehearsed, repeated, woven into stories meant to deceive, distract, and dominate. The anatomy of a pathological liar. Pathological lying is not just about bending the truth. It's the compulsive, almost addictive habit of creating false realities, often without reason and without remorse. You'll notice, their stories change constantly. Their timelines never quite add up. Their reactions are exaggerated, especially when confronted. Ask them a direct question? They dodge, they spiral. And if you challenge them, you'll likely become the villain in their rewritten version of events. It's exhausting, it's manipulative, and it's deeply destructive. The workplace, a breeding ground for hidden lies. Lying doesn't just poison friendships or personal relationships. It infiltrates professional environments, where the damage spreads fast and deep. In the workplace, a single dishonest person can undermine trust, damage reputations, mislead decision-makers, and infect team morale like a virus. A culture built on performance, goals, and results is especially vulnerable to liars, because achievements can be fabricated and success can be faked for a while. But the truth always finds its way to the surface. A Stoic response, calm, clear, and grounded. So what do we do when we're faced with dishonesty, especially persistent, harmful, strategic lies? Stoicism offers us a timeless answer. Do not let their lies control your emotions or your character. Stay grounded, stay observant, stay composed. The Stoics remind us that while we cannot always stop deception, we can control how we respond to it. Don't retaliate with rage. Don't fall into gossip or emotional chaos. Instead, respond with clarity, courage, and truth. Real-life example. Anna and the fabricated success. Take Anna, for example. She was a focused, ethical accountant at her firm. One day, she began noticing something off. Tom, one of her co-workers, had been boasting in meetings, claiming huge project wins, taking credit for outcomes she knew weren't real. At first, Anna was shocked, then frustrated, then tempted to confront him, but instead of reacting emotionally, she turned to reason. She quietly gathered facts. She documented inconsistencies in Tom's reports. She noted when his words didn't match the reality she had witnessed. And when the time was right, she presented everything to her manager. Calmly, clearly, without anger, no personal attacks, no emotional outbursts, just truth. Her courage and composure led the company to conduct a formal investigation, which not only revealed the extent of Tom's deception, but also led to stronger policies around performance reporting and evaluation. Anna didn't just protect herself, she elevated the integrity of her workplace. That's the power of Stoic leadership. Not through volume, but through values. The greater impact of deceit and the remedy. Lies don't just manipulate situations, they manipulate people. They erode culture. They poison trust. They make good people feel small and wrong for telling the truth. But here's the hope. Even in a world of manipulation, truth has power. Stoicism teaches us not to become cynical, but to become wise, to become vigilant without becoming bitter, to become strategic without becoming sneaky, and above all, to become courageous enough to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Closing reflection and transition. So ask yourself, when faced with lies, how do you respond? With emotion or with awareness? With heat or with light? The Stoics would urge us to choose the higher road, to trust truth, to honor integrity, to respond, not react. And in doing so, we don't just survive deception, we dismantle it, one truth at a time. Now, as we move forward, we'll examine one final sign, perhaps the most painful one to face. When someone you trusted shows no remorse for the harm they've caused. Stay with us, because this last sign holds one of the greatest lessons for guarding your peace. We've walked through the signs: control, false charm, the absence of empathy, and the web of lies. Now we come to the final and perhaps most dangerous trait of all, mastery of manipulation. Because while lies can be caught and charm can wear off, manipulation is a game played in silence. And by the time you realize you're a pawn, it's often too late. Sign number 5, mastery of manipulation. In the complicated dance of human interaction, there are some who move with silent purpose, not to connect but to conquer. They don't raise their voice. They don't openly threaten. But behind every word, every gesture, lies intent, a quiet push, a subtle tilt, a carefully calculated game of influence. According to Stoic philosophy, the wise soul must always be ready, not just to recognize beauty and joy, but to face the darker parts of human nature. Evil doesn't always arrive as a monster. It sometimes comes cloaked in charm, competence, and charisma, the true nature of domination. At the heart of manipulation is one thing: control. But unlike those who demand power openly, manipulators prefer to work behind the scenes. They flatter to win your trust. They sympathize just enough to lower your guard. They present themselves as helpful, kind, even sacrificial. But underneath, there's a cold strategy, a hidden playbook, a desire to bend your will without you realizing it. They'll convince you that their idea was yours, that their desires are your responsibility, that their pain is your fault. And the scariest part, they'll make you feel grateful for it. Subtle signs of manipulation. How do you know when you're being manipulated? Sometimes it starts with a feeling, a whisper inside that something isn't quite right. Maybe they praise you excessively, only to guilt-trip you later. Maybe they offer help just before asking for a favor. Maybe every conversation feels like a trap wrapped in a compliment. These people don't just lie. They engineer your choices. And over time, their influence becomes so entangled in your mind that you stop trusting your own voice. The cost of falling into the trap. When you realize you've been manipulated, it hits like a betrayal you can't name. You question everything. Was the connection ever real? Were your emotions genuine or engineered? How long have you been dancing to someone else's tune? The aftermath can be devastating. Loss of self-worth, cracked identity, emotional exhaustion, a deep distrust of others, even those who mean well. And yet, even here, Stoic philosophy offers us a way through. The Stoic response: strength from within. The Stoics teach that evil can only control us if we give it permission, that while deception may shake us, it cannot break us unless we allow it. Self-awareness is your sword, reflection is your shield, discernment is your compass. Epictetus once said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." This is where our power lies, not in changing the deceiver, but in reclaiming the judgment we handed over, awareness, discernment, and ethics. To avoid becoming a puppet, we must become deeply grounded in who we are. That requires slowing down, listening, asking difficult questions like, what parts of me are easily swayed by praise? Why did I silence my instincts? What boundary did I abandon, and when? In a world of subtle deceits, ethics become a torch. They light the way back to ourselves, to truth, to clarity, to freedom. Because when your sense of identity is rooted in virtue, no one can pull your strings, no matter how clever they are. Final reflection. Know yourself to guard your peace. Let's face it, manipulators will always exist. So will liars. So will the cold-hearted and the controlling. But recognizing them is only half the journey. The real work lies in discovering why we allow them in, how we give them power, and what we must strengthen in ourselves to stop the cycle. That's the ultimate teaching of Stoic philosophy. Know yourself, rule yourself, guard yourself, and through that wisdom build a life of calm strength and inner peace. Conclusion, an invitation inward. We've now explored 5 powerful signs that you may be dealing with a malicious person, but Stoic thought doesn't stop at observation. It calls us inward. It asks, who are you, really? What do you stand for? What parts of you are still vulnerable to fear, flattery, or falsehood? Because the journey isn't just about spotting the darkness in others, it's about shining a light on your own soul. When you do that, you don't just protect your peace, you become a beacon of it. Through this journey, we've explored 5 powerful signs that help us identify harmful people. But today's message goes even deeper, because recognizing evil around us is only half the battle. The other half is recognizing what it awakens within us. Discovering your true nature, the unexpected sign. We live in a world filled with diversity, people from different backgrounds, values, cultures, and beliefs. Each day we cross paths with individuals whose actions shape our thoughts, emotions, and even character. Some inspire us, some challenge us, others hurt us. In this shared space of humanity, one truth becomes undeniable. The ability to recognize and protect ourselves from harmful people is not just a skill, it's a necessity. And this is where Stoic philosophy becomes more than just an ancient system of thought. It becomes a roadmap for clarity, self-protection, and deeper understanding. The 5 signs revisited through the lens of self-awareness. As we reflect, let's briefly revisit these signs, not just to judge others, but to examine how we respond to them. Fakeness in communication. People with harmful intentions often mask their true selves behind overly sweet words. Their friendliness feels forced, crafted. Stoicism teaches us to observe the alignment between words and actions. Are they sincere, or are they skilled actors? The habit of blaming others. Rarely will a malevolent person say, "That was my fault." Instead, they deflect. They blame the system, the timing, or worse, you. Stoic thought reminds us, true strength comes from owning what's ours and releasing what isn't. Lack of empathy. One of the clearest signs of a harmful soul is the absence of compassion. If someone shows no regard for your feelings, your pain, your needs, they're not seeking connection, they're seeking control. And the Stoic response is to guard our peace, not chase their approval. Abuse of power. Evil often hides behind titles and authority. Some use their position not to serve, but to suppress. Stoicism teaches us to wield influence not as a weapon, but as a responsibility. Real leadership uplifts, not oppresses. Excessive self-love confidence is healthy, but when admiration turns into arrogance, it blinds people to the needs of others. Stoics value humility, knowing that we're part of a whole, and that what serves the community serves the self. From recognition to transformation now, recognizing these traits in others is just the beginning. What matters more is what you do with that knowledge. Do you set boundaries? Do you trust your instincts when something feels off? Do you take action, even when it's uncomfortable? The Stoics didn't just sit around discussing ideas, they lived them, applied them, and through their discipline, they became unshakable. You can too. A life of virtue and meaning. When we apply Stoic teachings in everyday life, something shifts. We stop being victims of toxic people. We stop doubting ourselves. We begin building relationships rooted in truth, empathy, and strength. We learn that control is not about others, it's about ourselves. And in that control lies a kind of freedom the world can never take from us. Life will never be without difficulty, but when you respond with virtue, you build a life not just of survival, but of significance. A personal question for you. Let me ask you, have you encountered any of these signs in someone close to you? What did you do to protect yourself? How did it shape who you are today? You don't have to share it publicly, but reflect on it, because in that reflection, clarity is born, and through that clarity, we begin to transform. Final encouragement and call to action. If this video helped you see your life or your relationships with fresh eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this truth, and subscribe to our channel for more content that helps you live a stronger, wiser, and freer life. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new lesson rooted in timeless wisdom. Because in a world that's fast, loud, and often chaotic, your soul deserves stillness, your mind deserves clarity, and your heart deserves protection. Parting words, thank you for spending this time with us, exploring Stoic philosophy not just as theory, but as a living tool for courage, discernment, and peace. Remember, true power is not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. Live by virtue, stand in truth, choose the higher road, even when it's hard. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay strong, stay grounded, and stay free.